Ethiopia, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, is the only African nation that has never been colonized. But this does not mean that the country has not passed through challenging periods and aggression. Throughout history, Ethiopians have paid invaluable sacrifices defending their sovereignty from foreign aggression. Nothing equals the repeated Italian wars waged to conquer and colonize Ethiopia. The nation paid the biggest price when the Italian aggressors invaded the country in the 1930s. Ethiopians sustained a vigilant resistance to Italian rule throughout its brief period of occupation. Italy's response was brutal and atrocious. Mussolini ordered all patriots to be shot, and his soldiers murdered Ethiopians indiscriminately, using large-scale bombing, poison gas, and machine gunning from the air. The Italians killed thousands of Ethiopians, including those who took shelter in religious institutions. An example of such horrendous acts took place in the monastery of Debre Libanos, situated just 100 kilometers north of Addis Ababa. The Italian soldiers burned down this monastery of more than 700 years and massacred over 300 monks and their religious followers. The victims were buried in this mass grave.
የጣሊያ ፋሺስት በ1929 ዓመተ ምህረት የካቲት 12 ቀን በአዲስ አበባ ኗሪ ላይ በደብረ ሊባኖስ ምዕመናን ባራዳ ጊዮርጊስ የድሮ ከርሸሌ ወይም ደግሞ ወይንቤት በሚባለው በግፍና በጭካኔ በተመላበት ሁኔታ በመትረየስ በአካፋ በዱላ ከ30,000 በላይ ሰው ጨፍጭፏል።
Ethiopian resistance reached a peak in February 1937 with an assassination attempt on the Italian viceroy, Graziani. In reprisal, the Italians rampaged for 3 days, burning alive, murdering, and beheading several thousands of people in and around Addis Ababa. Thousands of women and children were gassed to death. Homes were burned, and various types of fascist brutality were used in retaliation. Mass killings spread all over Ethiopia, wherever there was an Italian army stationed. In Addis Ababa alone, in just a single day, many thousands of people lost their lives. Except for those burned alive in their homes and inside churches, many of the dead were buried in a mass grave on the outskirts of the city.
ኢጣሊያን በተለይ በ6 ኪሎ አሁን አውልቱ የአርበኞች ሰማዕታት በተሰራበት ላይ ከፍተኛ ጭፍጨፋ አድርጓል። ያም አልበቃውም የህግ እስረኞች ታስረው የነበሩትን ሰዎች ያለው እስር ቤት እዚያ ሁሉ ፈጅቷል። ቤትም እየተዘዋወረ ብዙ ህዝብ ፈጅቷል።
The Italian massacre in Kerchele is remembered not only as being the first mass murder of innocent civilians committed by a foreign aggressor in Ethiopian history, it also became an historic event introducing the first, the largest, and active mass grave at the central prison site in Addis Ababa. Since that time, the prison started to serve as a torture, imprisonment, and grave site by consecutive governments until the last 2 decades. This prison later became known as Alem Bekagn, which literally translated means farewell to the world. With the overthrow of Emperor Haile Selassie's regime in 1974, a provisional council of soldiers, the Derg, seized power in Ethiopia and installed a government which was socialist in name and military dictatorship in governance. This military regime summarily executed 59 citizens that included the royal family, ministers, and generals from the imperial government. They were buried in a mass grave in this same prison compound established by the Italians. A few years after taking power, to avoid any opposition, the Derg introduced a campaign named Red Terror. During the Red Terror, no one was safe from being sent to jail or killed indiscriminately throughout the nation. The youth of Ethiopia were particularly targeted. In particular, after the mid-1970s, Alem Bekagn became the center of mass imprisonments and executions. Thousands of students, teachers, workers, and ordinary Ethiopians suspected of supporting opposition groups were imprisoned without charge, tortured, and executed.
Because of lack of tolerance, because of lack of dialogue, and because of lack of understanding and appreciating one another, or appreciating the differences, the slight difference that could exist between different groups and between the military groups, the kind of trouble, the kind of death took place in this country. And up to now, I don't think anybody would tell exactly the number. Some are saying around 1 million, some are saying about 800,000.
This happened randomly across the country, and bodies were left for up to 3 days on the streets, in front of public buildings, schools, universities, in order to scare away others into not supporting opposition groups. Even the parents and relatives of victims were not allowed to mourn or to collect the body of the victims and bury their loved ones. All the victims were buried in unknown mass graves during the night, the major one being inside the Alem Bekagn prison compound. There would be no one else fitting to tell the horrible scenes in the prisons than the survivors themselves.
I was imprisoned for almost 13 years, and I had my third daughter in prison, and my husband, Ethiopian a known student leader, a known activist, and a founder of one of the political parties, which was the EPRP, Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party, was executed, and so his friends, his colleagues, and the same with me. So many friends, so many women, girls were executed while we were in prison, and without being taken to any court.
More disturbingly, systematic torture of those arrested was also commonplace. This included sleep deprivation, burning bodies with cigarettes and electric currents, flogging and hanging individuals by the arms, as well as sexual assaults and the ripping out of fingernails.
The procedure was that you would be taken to a torturing room, and you would be tortured, you'd be abused, and that was the words taken.
Bodies of those killed would then be placed on display in the streets with posters on their corpses branding them as enemies of the revolution. Some victims were even forced to dig their own graves before being murdered, while families were made to pay a fee to retrieve bodies of their relatives. We are now at a time where things have changed for the better as far as the Alem Bekagn is concerned. It no more serves as a prison or torture center. This famous center of detention, torture, and murder has now become the headquarters of the African Union and Conference Center. Cognizant of the fact that various human rights violations have been committed at the site, the African Union, in its resolution of April 8, 2004, endorsed the African Union Human Rights Memorial, AUHRM project. The AUHRM project is meant to commemorate the victims of the crimes on the African continent at large, including the Rwandan genocide, slavery, and apartheid in South Africa. As a follow-up to this initiative, the AUHRM monument was erected on the grounds of the Alem Bekagn prison, adjacent to the African Union headquarters, on the 28th of January, 2012. For the victims of the atrocities, the scars will be difficult to fade away, but erecting memorials at historic sites and reflecting and honoring them collectively could help to lessen the pain.
This place of Alem Bekagn, where I was for almost 12 years, because the first 8 or 9 months I was in Malawi, or I think the 7 months I was in Malawi, and the rest of the time I was in Alem Bekagn, in which we were always thinking that one day, if we make it, if we can come out, that place would turn out to be a memorial, a place where we can say, we can show that any society should not go through this kind of suffering just because of her thinking or her or his differences with any existing political system in a country.
ዳግም እንዲህ አይነት ጭፍጨፋ በኢትዮጵያ ብቻ ሳይሆን በአፍሪካ በሌላውም ዓለም ይህ ጭፍጨፋ እንዳይደገም አጥብቆ መስራትና ማስተማር ቅስቀሳ ማድረግ ያስፈልጋል።
The memorial is not only dedicated to the Ethiopian victims, but to all Africans who have suffered from externally caused as well as self-inflicted human rights abuses and atrocities. It is therefore most appropriate to have a monument on the premises of the African Union headquarters. Beyond serving as a reminder of the horrific experiences of Alem Bekagn and the Red Terror, as well as the numerous human rights abuses across Africa, the memorial cements the collective vow of Africa that such atrocities should never and will never be committed again.